Hey, what's up everybody? My name is Brandon. I'm a board certified pediatrician and pediatric ICU doctor, and continuing on giving quick hits about RSV. So in the last video, we said that RSV stands for respiratory syncytial virus, and it can cause infections anywhere along the respiratory tract, but it's most famous for causing 50 to 80% of cases of bronchiolitis. Okay, so to understand what bronchiolitis is, we have to do a quick review of the respiratory anatomy for it really to make sense. So the easiest way to do this is probably to just trace air from the outside environment and how it gets down into the lungs. So to start off, it goes into the nose or the mouth, and then it goes to the back of the throat, which we often call the nasopharynx or oropharynx, but it's essentially just the throat. It comes down to this critical structure here called the voice box, which to me separates the upper respiratory tract from the lower respiratory tract. This is where the vocal cords are, and it's really how you produce speech. From the voice box, we go down into the trachea. The trachea is a long tube that takes air down to about the nipple line and then splits into two structures called bronchi, or each one is called a bronchus. Each main stem bronchus branches into segmental bronchi, which branch again and again and again, and eventually they form these really small tubes called bronchioles. But still, they're just little tubes that are transmitting air to the place where the lungs work, where gas exchange happens. And that is here called the alveolus. So the alveolus is basically the functional unit of the lung, and it's where gas exchange happens. At the end of the day, the lungs have two jobs. One, get oxygen in, and two, get carbon dioxide out. And so this is really where it happens, where it's just a small air-filled sac that can do gas exchange with the capillary beds or the blood. So you can imagine that bronchiolitis is actually inflammation of those little bronchioles. Whenever we say itis in medicine, we just mean inflammation. It often implies there's an infection, but not necessarily. But we say itis for inflammation, and then whatever comes before it really tells us what structure we're talking about. And so in this case, bronchiolitis just means inflammation with that RSV virus or infection with that RSV virus in those tiny tubes kind of throughout the lungs. That said, really just for reference and to drive the point home, RSV could cause infections in a number of different places depending on which structure gets infected. So if it's the nose and the sinuses, then we would call it rhinosinusitis or inflammation of the nose and sinuses. And this is basically the common cold. It can infect the middle ear space, so otitis media. It can infect the voice box and the trachea around it like we were talking about. And this is called croup, but it's also called laryngotracheitis like we talked about. If those big mainstem bronchi or the segmental bronchi get infected, we would call this bronchitis. And this is actually the most common lung infection for adults who get RSV. And then of course, if it gets past the bronchi into the bronchioles, like we said, this is bronchiolitis. So I hope that was helpful. On the next video, we'll actually talk about respiratory distress and how to identify warning signs when a kid has bronchiolitis. And I should have said before, if you're enjoying these but want more detail, I actually have a YouTube channel where the videos are much longer and go into a lot more depth, but hopefully this is helpful, and we'll see you at the next video.